So let's go ahead and get started with the call to order. So the time is 6:05, and I'll do a roll call vote. Roll call attendance. Susan Franklin.
Susan Franklin, aye.
Corey Evans.
Corey Evans here.
Michael Dick. You're on mute, Michael. Still on mute.
I'm on the screen. I'm here.
All right. Now you're off mute and we can hear you. Thank you. And Brian Host present. So that makes a quorum. We'll announce the others as they join. Hopefully I recall to do that. And with that, let's jump right into the school requests for fiscal 2025. Lance and Sue, I'm going to defer to you on what order you'd like to do, but I just ask you to recognize that some of these requests, specifically the fire alarm, I believe this safety line, and then the Deer Hill retiling, are all part of the capital stabilization, the school capital special stabilization fund, whereas the others are, I think, directed towards the regular capital stabilization fund. So I'd like to break them into two pieces. It might be easier to start with the capital, just because it's a shorter list and probably a bigger conversation, but I leave it to you as to what order you'd like to go.
Brian, I think that's fine. We can, in fact, we've been discussing it at committee, broken in that exact era as well.
Okay.
So we talk about stabilization and capital. So we are happy to start with capital. We have just for point of order, we have a presentation we can go through.
Okay.
But I believe you have the line items there, and I don't know that the presentation adds that much more to the discussion. We can certainly run through it page by page, or we can just jump into any sort of narratives or questions that the committee might have.
And I'm going to defer to other capital members here, but I'll just share my thoughts. I didn't see a lot of information in the presentation itself. There just seems to be a page dedicated to to each one of these, with the exception of perhaps the buses. There's a little bit of meat on the bones there that might be helpful to go through, but the rest of it seemed extraordinarily high level. So maybe we just go through the line items with the exception of.
Sure. Why don't we do that?
Unless you feel there's something in this presentation that's going to help you as a.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can run the line items. We can do it in order. We could defer buses to the last. I'll take your lead on that. How would you like me to proceed?
Does anyone else on the committee have a strong feeling about this? To the extent anyone slipped through this, I just didn't really see much in the presentation that I think would be.
I've only just opened it.
Okay.
So I would appreciate a walkthrough and an explanation of each line.
Okay.
And with the explanation, why the priority is set where it is.
So why don't we just walk through? We'll use the presentation as a guidepost, but we'll walk through the line items. How about that?
Okay.
So I'll start if you don't mind, and then you can fill in when I go over gaps. Otherwise, I'll have nothing to add and no reason to be here. So if that's all right with you, I'll plow ahead.
And what document are you using?
So right now, I'm just going to look at the FY25 capital request list, which is a Excel spreadsheet that was circulated earlier today. There's also a PowerPoint presentation entitled FY25 school capital requests. If you want to have both those open, we can just run through that. But
I only have the capital request March 4th, 24. That's all I've got.
Okay, what I can do then is I'll just share my screen.
Okay.
And put the capital request list on the screen here. It's pretty amazing what a couple of years of a pandemic can do to technological skills. So
yours, but not mine, Lance. Congratulations.
So can everyone see the updated request list?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So what we have here, you can see the items on the left-hand side is C, S is stabilization. We'll table the stabilization discussion until a few moments. So the first item on the list is the bus lease. Mike, to your point about prioritization, getting our kids to school is an absolute priority. So we currently have a lease of 8 diesel buses. This is a bring down and further funds that 8 bus lease for another year. The request there is $150,000. That is the lease cost of the 8 buses that we've had, same lease as last year. So we can go into detail about the needs of the district on transportation if you'd like, but that's the request from the capital fund.
So,
Okay.
so let me just ask you a question. What year of the lease are we in?
I believe this is year 2. Last year was year 1.
Correct.
Okay. So we're in year 2 of the lease, and historically we've had a formulaic. Okay, so there's no change in the number of buses. This is just year 2 of the deal that we agreed to when we entered into this lease a year ago. And historically we've had a formulaic split of this, recognizing that this bundles what historically had been a separate maintenance line item that was running through the operating costs. I assume that this 150 is the gross cost of the lease and not the net based on that calculation. Is that accurate? Because
It is
150 last year.
You did not. I think capital funded 90 last year, but the request was 145. The reason we have started requesting the full amount and kind of understanding that there's a formulaic split is that the associated costs with the buses, including fuel and drivers and all the other things, have gone up. So we're kind of bundling that into the capital request with the understanding that that there has been this formula, but that's where that 150 comes from. Is that correct, Sue?
That's correct.
Okay. I guess a couple knee-jerk reactions, and then I'm going to open this to other members on the committee. We're going to have to think about this because this is now becoming a recurring request. When we set this up, it was the formula was set specifically on the lease cost plus the maintenance cost. It had nothing to do with fuel, drivers, insurance, licensing, any of the other things that are, purely operating costs that have absolutely nothing to do with a lease or an own decision. So I appreciate that those operating costs went up. That's not really a reason to shift it into the capital budget, and the capital stabilization fund is a burden.
So I might be able to short circuit some of this discussion. Last year, you guys did agree to I think it was a $90,000 funding. And I think, and Brian, from our prior conversations, I'm going to anticipate that where you would go here is that the delta on that should be more of an operating budget expense rather than a capital request. I'm sympathetic to that position. So if it's the determination of this committee to fund at the formulaic rate, I think we'll take that back and figure out where we go from there.
Okay. If something changes in terms of capital, or something changes in terms of true maintenance cost, I think that's an intellectually valid conversation to shift the capital cost, because that's what the original formula was set up on. But if this is really an increase in operating costs, I don't think we want to see it shifted. Yeah. So
is that correct, or is there a
This is strictly just to lease the buses. This doesn't include the gas, the maintenance.
Yeah, we're talking past each other. We've never carried the full cost of the lease because the lease includes the cost of maintenance for the buses. Historically, we used to pay as a school, well into the 6 digits to fix our buses, which is why we moved to leasing in the first place. Okay, we used to own all our buses. And we used to, prior to 2015, we were averaging about $15,000 a year per bus in maintenance cost, which was extraordinary. And in certain cases, we would have individual buses that would rack up maintenance costs of in excess of $25,000 in a given year, including on buses that weren't even worth $25,000. So the reason we moved to leasing in the first place had nothing to do with cost of capital. It had to do with the fact that we were struggling, I guess is probably the best word, to contain our maintenance costs. And part of that was just a mindset of holding on to buses too long. And so we switched to leasing, which includes bumper to bumper warranty, bumper to bumper maintenance, with the exception of really small stuff. And, that brought our maintenance cost per bus down to about, $1,000 per year in the early years. And that's why we did it. I know there's confusion about this. And so that's why there was a split of the lease cost. I understand the gross lease cost is 150, but bundled into that 150 is almost all of your maintenance costs. And that's why we picked up a portion and not all of it. So we can go back and, just educate everybody on how and why that original split was set up. So there's no confusion. It wasn't meant to be a shell game, but this bus lease basically got us out of the major maintenance business and saved us, well in excess of $100,000 in doing it. And that's why there's a cost split. So we can go back and look at that, but absent some really compelling reason to change the split, I'm not inclined to just jump there.
So, and being candid, I don't think we are prepared to request a change in the split at this point.
Okay.
That may be something we look at in our capital process for next year.
Okay.
But right now, I think, you see what we put in,
Right.
and acknowledge that there is a historic practice of a split, and so that's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
And what were we in for last year?
I believe we funded 90,000.
Okay. That's certainly a logical cut and paste until we revisit the split.
Yep.
Okay. Because we don't currently have a line item in our operating budget for the bus lease. We were partially funding it from the revolving account,
Right.
which can no longer sustain it. With the, I can just go over a couple things. With the shortage of drivers, we had to up their benefits and raise their salaries. The first year, the raise in salaries was almost $90,000. We also added probably 4 or 5 bus drivers to go along with that, along with the elephant in the room, that we're spending $4,500 or $4,200 a month to rent space for a parking lot, which we didn't budget for and haven't accounted for. And currently, without the electric bus on hand, we have been leasing, I shouldn't say leasing, we have been renting month to month a bus from First Student at $150 a day, which is another $4,500 a month. So, we're definitely don't have really many places to go to find the additional $60,000.
So, but I think what we're hearing from the capital group here is that their view, and again, I'm not unsympathetic to the view, is that those expenses are budget expenses, not capital request expenses. And so we may have a different, we may have to find a
different bucket.
pot. Yep.
How much of the First Student burden that you're carrying right now will be alleviated when we get the electric bus?
$4,500 a month will go away.
Okay, so 4,500 times
12, is it
$54,000, right?
Is the full 4,500, or because does First Student come with? I thought First Student came with a driver, so I guess conceivably we'd be paying a driver in the electric bus.
No, so we in past years, we had our own buses, but we were utilizing First Student drivers. We have since hired our own drivers.
Oh, okay.
But we needed that electric bus to run our fleet come September. And because it wasn't there, we are renting from First Student.
I understand. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, so I'm just trying to be sympathetic and understand the numbers as they move around here. So if we sign on, when the electric bus shows up and capital picks up the lease on that, right?
I think we already didn't we already do that?
Well, actually, we already did.
We did $25,000.
We already did last year, and I guess we probably haven't actually paid it. So there's probably $25K sitting in an account somewhere for this fiscal year. When does the bus show up? Do we know?
Weeks.
It's supposed to be here within the next few weeks. They're hoping to do some type of like ribbon cutting during Earth Day week. But again,
the bus is found and accounted for. We just there's a training element that has to be done. So once that's done, it can be delivered down here. So that this is weeks, not months, and we're not going to tie the delivery of the bus to any sort of ceremonial thing. We can do that independent of it. So we will get the bus as soon as we can.
Excellent.
Okay, so a couple of I'm just trying to do math real time and keep track of the numbers because we got a bunch of moving pieces here, and I also want to be a little at least empathetic with regards to what you're dealing with. So we funded the electric bus for fiscal 24, but didn't spend the money. So we're going to spend what, maybe 4 months of it? April, May, June, right? We're going to spend 1 quarter of 25 grand. So we're going to have.
I don't think I don't like this path. I know what you're trying to do,
Mhm.
Brian. I think we're gonna end up in a place where we're just upside down.
Well, hold on. What I'm saying is, our actual request for the electric bus lease for this year doesn't need to be a full 25 because for fiscal 25, because we're going to have 3/4 of a year of funds left over at the end of fiscal 24.
I don't think 25 was for what was it per year? I thought it was for a time period more than 1 year.
25 per year.
25 per year
for 5
for
years.
5 years.
Okay, my apologies.
It's 25 per year for 5 years. So because they basically negotiated that to be,
I remember.
equal to and indifferent to a diesel bus from a cost perspective. Okay, so we're not going to actually need to budget a full 25 for the electric bus lease. And we're just wrestling with trying to get this stuff to fit on our side. Sue and Lance. So that's the other math that's going around. So we're going to have some rollover.
I would think technically we could take the $25,000 off this year altogether because we have 25,000 sitting in the bank that we haven't touched.
Right, but
We'll
you're
have to pay part of it this year.
Yeah, you're gonna have to burn a quarter of it. So once the bus shows up, was my point. So I don't want to leave you guys short either. So okay, so from capital's perspective, we've got an unspent appropriation sitting in capital stabilization for 25, and a quarter of it's going to get burned. 3/4 of it will be available to roll over to 25. Okay, so we're gonna have to. So that request will go. The new request will go down. You need 25 for fiscal 25, but we're going to have whatever 19 of it already.
Right.
With regard, okay, and once that bus shows up, you guys are going to save. The school revolving fund is going to save 54 grand next year because you're not going to have to cough it out to first student. So that should pretty substantially,
that should close that gap.
Yeah, it should really substantially free up a lot of the pressure that you're feeling. So I guess, and I'm just thinking through this real time. If I'm missing something, I'm getting it wrong, just somebody jump in. But my thought is, let's just roll this over, at last year's appropriation, and hopefully with the, the 54,000 of savings that you guys get, you're feeling more comfortable with your revolving fund.
I think that math works because if we're gonna fund bus lease at 90 as we did last year, then we have 19 coming in for offsetting electric bus, which or rather 19, which that plus the balance of the account after the appropriation spent.
You'll get the full 25. You'll get whatever the cost is for 24 plus the full.
Then we have cost savings of 54. Coming from no longer having first student, that covers that delta between 90 and 150.
Right.
And I think we have some work to do in our next budget cycle to take some of these expenses and get a bus transportation line item in our budget, in our operating. Now, as you're all aware, there's no flex in operating, at least at the schools.
Right.
But we'll see what we can come up with and be creative.
So when this was originally constructed, there was never any concept that this would ever draw off of your operating budget. The idea was
that's
understood. Funded out of the revolving fund, and it sounds like I'll also say this out loud. I mean, it when this was set up, it seemed to be a more expedient and arguably perhaps less expensive way to go versus just full outsourcing. All of that said, it seems that your operating expenses with regards to, being paid out of the revolving fund continue to escalate pretty substantially. And, I don't know what the numbers are on full outsourcing, but I do know that we are one of the very few districts, at least in Eastern Massachusetts, that still pieces together our own transportation program in terms of either owning or leasing buses, hiring our own employees.
We did do a review of that before the renewal of the bus lease last year. Wasn't a fulsome review to be candid, but it was a review of the options. We did talk to potential vendors about doing that. What we learned in that is that there are significant, the costs are roughly equivalent by and large. And what we learned is that there are massive advantages, especially in a driver shortage situation, of having control over your own resources. So that informed us to continue to recommend the leasing of the buses last year. It's always something we should go back and revisit, probably at the termination of this lease. But I don't think we're leaving significant money on the table by leasing and having bus drivers rather than full outsourcing.
Okay. It's a question of both dollars and also, your time, frankly, to manage this, as opposed to literally just signing a contract and saying, here, North River, First Student, Copland Enterprises, whatever, we've got one.
It's not quite as turnkey. There's still stuff you have to manage.
Okay.
But it's again, it's a good suggestion. We'll take that and keep that keep that as an arrow in our quiver for our transportation.
And we have done, we do stay in touch with the other districts, and I can tell you, like with First Student, which is one of the popular bus companies in the area. When I've spoken to them, looking for buses to help us with field trips or athletics, they don't have the spare buses, and they've also said that they double up their routes quite often, which is one thing that we found out our community here does not like, to double up routes, because it lengthens the time the children are on the bus.
Okay.
So at least with our own, we can control whether we're doubling up.
Okay. I want to be, I just want to delicately step back. I've kind of pushed right up to, and I don't want to step over the line into your operations. I just want to be respectful of that. But there is sort of a hazy line between capital and operating, and decisions on capital influence operating, decisions on operating influence capital. So, we're just kind of in this zone, and whichever way makes the most sense, both SENSE and CENTS, we will partner with you on that. Okay.
Very much appreciate that, and your feedback on either side of the ledger is very, very, very valuable. So thank you.
Yeah. All right. So we just whipped through a lot, including doing a bunch of math real time, and I just want to pause for a second. There were a whole bunch of people on the call. I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to question anything that was just sort of rattled about.
And I'm getting a text now that says that we're supposed to have the electric bus delivered next week.
Okay.
Better. But we're going to wait for the ribbon cutting. I'm kidding. We're not going to wait for the ribbon cutting.
So we're in year 2 of what is it, 5-year lease?
The electric bus is 5. Yeah, I think both.
No, I mean for the 8 fleet.
The 8 fleet, 4.
4 year.
4 year.
So we got 2 more. Going forward, we should expect a 90,000 for the next 2 years, just for that to be at least level funded for the terms of the lease. Okay, got it. Plus the 25 for the electric.
Right. Subject to any sort of discussion about whether or not this is still the right number, but given the focus of the split on maintenance sharing and the like, worth underwriting, but probably the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. At least based on expectation. Yeah. Great.
Just to reiterate, because
I have a set of questions.
Michael, please go ahead.
Okay. Brian, I certainly appreciate your brain power, but I am not comfortable with the basically a mini meeting that you just had with the school administration. I know that we've got liaisons to the schools, and perhaps these things can be worked out ahead of our meetings. That said, I have a number of questions. If you like, I'll just go through them one by one. On the question of the parking lots, I would like to know why we are not using our own parking lots at the middle high school. It seems to me that there is a priority for school buses and the comfort of our school bus drivers, which trumps student parking. And I would like to really understand why that has not been even discussed as a possible technique to save yourselves $4,500 per month. Do you want to answer that, or should I continue through my questions?
I guess what I would say at that point, there's lots of discussion of the school bus parking. That's been a perennial issue. Everything has been considered, but I will note that there's nothing on our capital request about school bus parking. So nothing on our request, and that is in our operating budget. And so we are budgeting for that.
Okay, okay. I'd just like to know, what percentage of students actually ride the bus? What is the load factor on the buses for all of them, for all 9?
So we have, and I can share my screen here if you'd like. I'm gonna have to do a new share. Is that how I do this?
You have to
Yes. So
stop
just
sharing and then go back.
stop sharing. So we have those figures broken out by route and by flight. And as a reminder, we have what I call flights, but two runs through the town, one for the elementary school, one for the middle high school. We have 8 buses, and we've broken it, and then they have 8 routes. So
And
now
what
with that,
about the first student bus? Is that a 9th bus, or is that part of the 8?
the first student bus is part of it is a 9th bus, and then we have a spare.
Correct.
Okay, so
We're currently
Um,
running 10 buses.
okay. And how
So-
many students ride the bus, and what's the load on
So
those buses?
can you see my screen now? It's you
I
can see
can, yes.
some. So what we have here broken down, and it's not in Excel, so I can't sum it up, but we can come back to you with this in a manipulable format for use. But you can see that routes 2 through 9, those are our primary buses. Route 1 is the Metco route, so it's not reflected on here. You can see at the middle high school, we have routes that ranges anywhere from 19 to 41 is the most busy bus. That's the middle high
51.
school. 51. Route 8. Middle high school, where you expect slightly less utilization because at a certain point the high school students start to drive. The elementary school, however, we have a different story. None of those children drive, primarily because they're not of driving age. And also we have a population bump in the elementary schools where we have higher rates of people, especially in the lower grades. And you can see there that we actually have one bus with 77 passengers. That's literally at capacity. Another one at 70. And you can see these route times that these routes take, upwards of 40 minutes. With the way that our schools have moved openings and opening times, and so that we start later at the elementary school, it's more imperative for these route times to be shorter so that the kids can come back and get to activities and the like, and it doesn't eat up their entire day sitting on the bus. But as you can see right now, for 4 of our bus routes, that's 80 minutes a day on the bus for about 200 kids.
Mhm. And when I ask the load factor, let's take elementary, Route 6 is 77. Is that 77 kids on one bus, or is that going around twice?
77 kids on one bus, one trip.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you define what doubling up is, and why is that unpopular?
So
I'll
double
defer to you
up.
on that.
When we had to double up, we would take the route with the shortest time. So like Route 2, for example, Route 2 would go out, do their run, go back to the school and pick up another set as if it's a different set. It's a whole different bus route. So
Would be
it would
Route 2, we'd run Route 2 and then
lengthen.
run Route 7.
Correct. Which lengthens the time. And on
and
the
so
middle,
that-
like for the middle and the high school, even though it's a 77 passenger bus, because of the size of the children, there can only be 2 per seat. So it's usually in the ballpark of anywhere from 40 to 50 on those buses. The elementary is a 77 passenger. We have one that's at max. The rest of them are within the ballpark of max. Again, they can carry 3 students per seat, but not to every seat, because obviously some children are bigger than others. And
Oh,
as, you know, it's obviously our elementary routes that drive how many buses we need.
Okay, you mentioned that there's a bump. Is there a forecast for an increase in student population coming out of the elementary school?
Hard to say. We have a pretty big population bump in the second grade now, I believe it is, Sue. And also in the, I want to say the kindergarten. But by and large, you know, we're expecting modest growth of students, but we're not, those projections and anticipations aren't factored into our transportation planning. We have what we need as far, we need 8 buses as this data can demonstrate. We're not forecasting at this point the need for an additional bus. Would love to take one, but that's in the money is infinite sort of category. We understand that there's other things going on. So we're making do with what we have, but we have a fleet of 10 buses. We do need the 10 buses. We need the spare, and we need the 8. So that's where we are.
I'm getting
Just to give you
confused on the number 8, because what we have in front of us, I believe, is 9 buses plus the electric bus. Or am I?
Yes.
I'm just confused.
we're starting at
So-
bus 2, so there's only 8 buses plus the electric plus the Bluebird.
And the Bluebird is our kind of spare bus, emergency bus for when one of the other buses goes down.
Correct. So for,
And-
you know, for an example, last Thursday, we had a senior class field trip. So that took up 2 buses. And then we had an athletic trip. We had one of our buses in the shop. So we literally borrowed a bus from Situate.
Okay.
The week before that, Steve Rotundi, the athletic director, had to cancel, I don't know if it was a game or a practice, because we did not have buses available and the other schools around us weren't available to lend us a bus.
But
So we are tight with buses.
So to put a fine point on it, in order to operate 8 routes with the other demands on the school's transportation infrastructure coming from sports and athletics, plus the need for redundancy in case of a breakdown, you need 10 buses. So you need the two extra buses that aren't necessarily assigned to a route, but can be available for additional sporting events or to fill in the case of a breakdown.
and
Right, so
that extra
the-
bus we've fully paid off. We own that outright, correct? There's no,
The-
yeah, so that's
the
why it's not
Bluebird
a
is
request
owned.
list. Yeah,
Correct.
it's just an asset.
that
we
was
already
my
have.
question too.
Yep.
All right.
So the Bluebird we do own, we limit it to just in town. It's the same when the electric bus arrives, it will be limited to just in town.
Okay. On the revolving fund, what is the revenue that goes into the revolving fund? Where does that come from?
Parents.
Parents pay to ride.
So this is school bus fees.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Can the revenue fees or fees be increased?
We have looked at that. Right now we charge $350. And in comparison to surrounding towns, we are on the higher side of that. There are a few towns that are higher than that. But just when we did a quick survey, which I don't have it with me today, but I can certainly get it to you. The rates were less than $350. But we did consider, I did put something together about a rate increase just in case we needed to have that conversation.
Sure. Well, I guess this would be a question for the advisory committee ultimately, but if we find that, capital stabilization fund is overwhelmed, it may be a tactic to increase revenue to help you cover some of the costs that we might not be able to. So just an observation. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Looks like Francine's joined us. I apologize, I missed the exact time that she dialed in. Susan, Francine, do either of you have questions on the buses?
I do not. I mean, we've been doing the leasing program for a while, but other than the one you brought up with the with the additional costs from last year, that was really the only thing that I noticed when I looked at the numbers earlier.
Okay. Francine, how about you?
I don't have any other questions.
Okay. I guess the only question I have regarding the buses is what bus are we running on the Metco route, and what is the ridership number on that route? And is it, where I'm going with that is whether or not it's appropriate to have a full bus, or we should be using something smaller.
So we have 50, a little over 50 children riding the
50.
Metco.
Okay, so it's a full load.
Um,
Okay. It's a full-
And we do not transport the Metco students. We have, we've gone out to bid and we outsource with Locomotion, who transport Metco. They have 2 buses, elementary and then middle and high.
Okay. Okay, and is that covered by the Metco program, or is that covered by our revolving?
Yes. So
Okay.
there's a Metco grant that covers 100% of that.
Okay, perfect. I'm just trying to understand the fleet need. So back to our fleet, you were only showing, so you were showing 9 routes, but not number 1, which is Metco. So that was 8 buses plus 2 spares fundamentally. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yes,
Okay. So it's 8 diesels plus we have the electric plus we have the Bluebird as a second spare.
yes,
Okay. And those 2 spares we use, I assume, for sports as well, right? The Bluebird and the electric.
yes.
Yes.
Okay. And when we send sports teams out, by definition, if we're using them for sports, they're going out of town. So would we pull the electric bus into one of our primary routes and put one of our leased buses onto that out of town sports route? Is that how that works?
So what our intention is to put the electric bus in as one of our regular daily route buses.
Okay.
What we want to put it to work. We want to, we want to use it, see the pros, the cons, see how it works, and it ultimately it stays in district, and we have the charger. So
Okay.
that would free up another bus to go out of town.
Okay. Perfect. All right. That's all I had for buses. Okay.
Mr. Hope, before we move off of buses, I do want to circle back to a question that Mr. Dick made, if that's all right.
Please.
Mr. Dick, I don't want to have you think that I was giving short shrift to your discussion about the parking lot. It isn't my favorite thing in the world that we're paying $4,500 a month to park the buses there. It is a focus of our committee. It has been we have been the recipient of community ire for some plans. But it is something that we are working at as a thorn in our side. We need to find a better way and a more cost-effective way to ideally have all of these buses parked on the school property while still accomplishing all the goals that we have for the school. So we are always open to thoughts and suggestions on that, and I will re-underwrite your suggestion about the middle high school. My recollection on that score is that we lose the operational ability to have parents and people come for sporting events and other needs that we have with that parking lot beyond just student parking. And then also I think it's also suboptimal in its layout for the buses to come in and out of that parking area in mass. But your point is well taken, and it is something that we are constantly, and since my tenure on this committee, have been considering for a long time. So I do appreciate the comment, and be aware it is something that is on our minds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lance, for clarifying that, and thank you, Michael, for raising the question. I guess with that, why don't we move on to the Chromebooks, unless there's any reason to touch on buses any further. I'd suggest we move on to Chromebooks. Okay. And actually, just before we move on to the Chromebooks, if I could just make a suggestion, and we'll probably all forget this by next year, but on these leases, whether it be the bus lease, the Chromebook lease, whatever, it would be really helpful just to say what year we're in and of how many years lease, right? We've got a couple of lease items here, just
Okay.
so that we as a committee know where we are in the process. And part of the problem is, silly me, I look at this and it says replacement of aging Chromebooks. We're actually not replacing aging Chromebooks this year, right? It's just another year of a lease. So I guess my first question is, where are we in this lease? Is it a 3-year lease? What year of the lease are we in?
So I shouldn't have given our presentation such short shrift. We've come prepared for that question. 540 Chromebooks. This is year 3 of 3 of the Chromebook lease.
This is year 3 of 3. Okay. And I was just looking at this $143,000 number on your spreadsheet versus the $69,000 number. I can't really reconcile, you know, those two numbers, because obviously 143 is not 69 times 3. So what number are we supposed to be looking at?
The 69.
Okay. Should we just ignore the 143 number on the spreadsheet? I don't
Yes,
really know what that is or where.
yes. Until
Yes,
I mean, I
let's-
can get you further information on it. This actual lease comes from the IT department through the town, through Mr. Menard.
Okay.
So I can definitely get the information through him because he has the lease.
Okay, but we are
And
in
actually-
year 3 of a 3-year lease.
Yep. And actually, I'll pop this back up. The one that went around, the capital request list, I think that went around here does have the correct 69,000 number
Yes.
on it.
Okay, but you see on line 6 over to the left there, it says 543-year lease, 143-100.
Yes,
Yeah, I don't
definitely
know
ignore
what
that.
I don't know what that number is. That's what was confusing
Yep.
me. Okay, so this is year 3 of 3. Okay, so there's no change in this number. This was the number last year. Is that
Yes.
fair to assume? Okay. All right, and how are they performing? I know our prior generation had some battery issues. We tried to, you know, I think we knew we had to select better this time around. Have we succeeded in doing that?
I believe we have. I have not heard any different. So I believe we have found a better model. And they've upgraded, obviously. So I have not heard any complaints.
Okay.
And that's, you know, strictly that's more middle high school.
Okay. I mean, well, that's first of all, that's good to hear. I know sometimes Chromebooks get painted with a broad brush. I will tell you that I bought a Chromebook prior to recommending school get Chromebooks. It's a 2015 Chromebook and it's just now dying. So we get 9 years out of it. There actually are, you know, decent Chromebooks out there that will last a long time. I'm gonna have to step away for 60 seconds. I've got a 100-pound dog that is about to break down a door to go outside. But I turn it over to Michael Dick to just run the committee in my absence for a moment.
All right. All right, the next thing that I see on the list is the projectors. 46 projectors for the high school at
Correct.
225, 483. So why don't you take us through that?
So last year we replaced all the smart panels or wall mounts at the middle school because they were the group of the school that had the oldest running projectors. The high school is the second oldest, which is why we moved. We had a director of technology who went into a plan over the a 4 or 5 year plan of what would be suboptimal for us to, in which direction to go. So you can see the problem with the current high school projectors are, I mean, they're old, they're age related, they're malfunctioning, they're not, they're not the solution anymore.
Susan, I'm sorry for interrupting. My apologies. I was just catching up on the Chromebook thing. We moved on to the next thing before I was quite
Oh.
ready. My apologies. Just quick question for you. Last year, the Chromebook lease was 52 and this year is 16. Is it the same? That was the second year now, or the last year. Is that the same lease program and did it go up or am I equating two things incorrectly?
I can actually check on that, Corey, because that number comes right from Ron Menard.
Okay. Last year 59. Okay. Yeah, because if it's the same, just like the bus, if it's the same lease, you kind of expect it to be the same number. That's what I had penciled in already. Okay. Then we'll circle back to that. Thank you.
So Corey, last year we had 52 grand on the
Last year was
Chromebook.
52 at ATM. Yeah, for Chromebook lease, second year of a 3-year program. I've got
Was it the same number of Chromebooks? Because I don't recall that we're doing an equal number each year. I'm just not sure. But that would explain a difference if we've got a bigger group to replace.
I will definitely get you the answer to that.
Let's double check.
Just
that.
thinking out loud, it's possible that Ron is linking in perhaps, a 3-year lease on, the 100 new Chromebooks that are several lines down. That could be the difference. But yeah, one way or another, let's start with the 52 from last year and figure out why the number would change.
I'll definitely get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
So the panels, it's just part of our plan,
52, yeah.
to roll over, and bring in some new panels. The older panels don't work as great. The middle school is, extremely happy with the panels that they have now. They work really great. We showed some, when we did our walkthrough for Capital, we showed the panels, and what they're capable of doing. So now it's the high school's turn. We've got the quote. We've gone from classroom to classroom to find out, which teachers would prefer to have them wall mounted and which teachers would prefer to have them mobile. So originally that price was like 268,000, but we had more than we thought that would prefer the mobile devices. So the number came down.
And I'll just
Interesting.
add, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Good, please, Lance, go on.
I'll just add from a pedagogical perspective, these panels have performed, the smart panels in the middle school have exceeded expectations. We are now able to, with our relatively aged facilities, we're able to bring in more modern teaching methods. Kids are able to present to the class. They're able to, as you can see on here, they're able to, actually draw on the boards. They can have dynamic presentations. They have the ability to show clarity on presentations. Unlike, you can see some of these ridiculous pictures, but there they are. Like, I don't think a teacher's really going to stand in front of the screen like that. But that is the disadvantage of this. It does distract from the overall learning experience, and the educator reaction to this has been that they've exceeded expectations in their ability to provide the learning product that we're trying to achieve. So ideally, and we talked about, buses. Some of the stuff that we're doing now is bring down. This is one of the only things I think that's a real core spend on our educational product and our capital request list. So that's why, and to Mr. Dick, to your point, your question in the very beginning, why this is the priority it is. This is one where we're seeing real educational returns and dividends from a pretty measurable basis. So this one is pretty important.
These are, from my math, it looks like these are about 20% more expensive than last year. Different model, different setup, reason for the increase in expense.
I believe we're requesting more.
No, I'm doing it on a per unit basis. Last time you were 28 for 129, 439 at 4,600 each. This
okay.
time you're at 5,500 each.
It's just going to be the increase in price.
So just to pin down on that, are we getting the exact same make and models that we were last year?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
this is just our print inflation coming to play.
Corey,
IT hasn't gone up by that much, so I'd like to dig in more if it's deployment, that kind of stuff, but it certainly shouldn't be acquisition. If it's screens, that's one thing that's come down in the inflationary numbers quite a bit.
It could also be the difference in correct me if I'm wrong, whether we're having wall mount or not wall mounts.
could be.
So can we get an explanation on the cost differential between mobile and wall mount? And if mobile is cheaper, why we wouldn't just get mobile across the board? Is mobile cheaper?
I do have the quote somewhere. I'm going to look for it right now.
Mr. I believe mobile is cheaper. The reason why we wouldn't just deploy mobile en masse is because there are classrooms where mobile, you can see actually the one in the picture here that I've shared is, I believe that's a mobile one, and it has like an apparatus around it. There are rooms where the square footage of the room does not lend itself to having something just sitting in the room. So you would need to have a wall mount version in order to effectively use it.
So when you're offering the choice to a teacher, are you expecting them to say, well, I'm in a classroom where mobile won't work? Or are they saying, well, my teaching style is better for wall mounted? Is it a professional educational choice that they're expressing?
I think it partly could be, but partly is we have we have specialists who don't have a classroom, so they travel.
So they don't get wall mount.
Okay, here's where I'm coming from. It seems to me that mobile is much more flexible than wall mounting. That wall, if you do wall mount, then you're tied to a particular classroom. And it should not really be a teacher's decision. It's really more the administrator's decision on how best to use your money and to have the greatest flexibility in deploying these displays. So, if it turns out that, yes, there are some classrooms that are so small that we can only wall mount, okay, that makes sense to me. So just
So
Where I'm coming
let's
from.
do this. Ms. Owen, do you have with you are able to get the price differential versus wall mount versus mobile?
I am, yes, I'm trying to bring up the quote right now.
And
Well,
actually, that might also be useful for Mr. Evans about the actual per unit price as well as is this the quote for this acquisition?
so while Sue's pulling that up, Corey, I just want to compare numbers with you because I just quickly took the 225 483 divided by 46 units and got to a $4,900 per unit number. It looks like you did slightly different math.
I did. I'm pulling off the 254,908
And that's what on the major capital spreadsheet, not
on the
school board list?
spreadsheet. Yeah, the draft capital list. Yeah,
Yeah,
that we were sent.
and let me just.
Is that not accurate anymore?
So-
254,908.
So let's ask Lance and Sue that question. What's the number? What's the request?
225 483.
Okay, so it's
Sorry, say that again, Susan. I'm sorry. You dropped off for me.
225 483.
Oh, okay. Then they're within 6% of each other. My apologies, because I was looking, I had just done this math off the sheet, dragging the numbers, and it was 20% different. That's in
Okay.
line with what I'd expect. Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
Thank you.
and Sue, just to understand, that number came down. It didn't change the number of units. That number came down because it's more mobile mount as opposed to wall mount. Is that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
'Cause
Thank you.
both have a unit count of 46. So
I've got the spreadsheet open alongside here. I've got, I guess, the
Yeah.
old version. Sorry,
I think you're working off an old version of the spreadsheet too, because the version of the spreadsheet that Michelle circulated has 225 on it today.
okay. My apologies.
Okay.
Oh, this one. Got it. Okay. I hadn't seen this one.
Okay.
yet.
And
Thank you.
okay, so we're at a unit cost of 4,900, and I guess Mike, well, first of all, Sue, were you able to find an answer to Mike's question in terms of the cost discrepancy?
I am trying to pull it up.
Okay.
So can you get off the top of your head, can you give an order of magnitude of what the price differential is? Is it
I honestly didn't
$1,000,
do it.
$100?
I didn't look,
I mean,
honestly. I didn't do a
you're-
comparison of the two.
You're within
we owe you-
6% of last time. So, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
But we owe you that response. If we can't pull it up now, we will come back to you with that.
Okay, that'd be great. Let's if it pops up, great. But otherwise, let's move on. So I guess my other question on the projectors is 46. Do we actually have 46 classrooms in the high school?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. It's a big number.
Big building.
Yeah.
So Sue, if you went back to the original quote that we looked at last year, is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay, so the price differential on a cart versus on a wall. The cart is $63.50 and the wall is $47.33.
Wall's cheaper.
Okay, so it's wall's cheaper. So I had it reversed.
Okay, well, it makes a
We
big
must have more
difference.
wall mounts here. Okay.
That also makes more sense because you don't have to buy a cart.
Thank you. I have no idea where it is. I'm looking, I have a quote, but it's for the middle school last year. So I can't put my hands on the quote for this year as quickly.
So why don't we do this, just to keep things proceeding? We will come back to you with both the numbers on the cost of cart versus wall mount and the distribution on the 46 as to how many of each.
That'd be great. Thanks, Lance. Okay. Do we have any other? But circling back to the most important issue, you're a year into a rollout of a substantial number of these units. Sounds like you're happy with them. Sounds like your teachers are happy with them. Sounds like the technology works. You're not having buyer's remorse. Like, how do we feel about this before we roll out $250,000 worth of these things? Are we excited and validated, or are we kind of?
From what I understand, it's a rousing success.
Okay.
So I have them both now.
Oh,
Oh,
great.
good.
Mhm.
I just need to share.
Oh.
I think Lance, you have to stop sharing.
Yep. So yeah, so the feedback has been uniformly positive and really, and I have a child in the school who's benefiting from these, and it's good reviews all around.
Okay, so everybody's happy. That's where the rubber meets the road.
So here, this is the quote for the 20. So I have two quotes, one for 20 and one for 26.
Yeah.
And this is that you can see what they're looking for. And then down here are the costs.
That's
It looks like 20 of them are wall mount.
20 of them are wall mount, yes. And the other one, if I can show you. Is this it? That's not it. It is coming. Sorry about that.
So those
Okay.
panel prices I saw were like in the $2,000 range. It sounds like there's a decent chunk of cost in terms of labor and mounting them. Did I catch that correctly?
I'm sorry. I'm still trying to
Probably warranty too.
bring this up.
Yeah.
And then here are the here are the other 26. So these are on the carts.
Okay. And what were the costs on those? It's 26 for 59. Yeah.
Well, that's
U-
just
u-
the
unit
that's
price
just
is
the
the same.
panel. I think
Sure.
we have to go down.
Scroll
down.
So keep
You know
going.
what? If
Now
Oh
we've
yeah,
got
it's
can
the
go back
audio.
and get this organized into some data
Yeah,
that we can
do
really
this-
look at. I think
Yes,
this
we-
is not a good use of our time right now.
I agree. Let's go back and we owe them 4 numbers. How many wall mount, how many cart, total cost per unit for wall mount, total cost per unit for cart. Let's get that. I don't
Terrific.
think we can piece it together in real time.
And then the rationale for the carts. I just want to make sure that you've really thought long and hard about going to the extra expense for a cart rather than nice to have is where you really need to have them.
That's fair. We can give you a few bullet points on that as well.
Great, thank you.
Just one more thing. Did we do the 65-inch panels in the middle school? Because I thought I saw 75 on that, 75.
Yeah,
inch.
a bunch were 75, but the delta was only $200, Susan, between the two
Okay.
sizes. Yeah, it was like it's basically the same price.
Okay.
You know, for an extra 10 inches for a kid that has glasses, I think it's worth it. My apologies to kids that have glasses, or if it's dark.
No offense taken. Corey.
No, you're right.
Okay. But even so, I mean, I took the 138,000 divided by 26 and I got what 5,300 and these are in at 4,900. So we're all in the same zone. But thank you, Sue, for coming back with just that detail when you can pull it.
Any other questions on the panels?
Mm-mm.
Nope.
All right, let's move on. Replacement furniture. I assume this is just another grade level.
This is the third grade level. So Deer Hill will have fully refurnished their students and teacher desks as needed. Because this is the third of a 3-year request.
Okay.
And again, on prioritization, that's, this is stuff that's very useful for, I mean, the furniture is very useful for the education process.
I mean, some of the desks are old, that, they have the lift tops that the hinges don't always work great and they slam down on kids' fingers. Very old style.
So I assume that after this year, we'll just continue to move on up into one of the other grades. Is that we're just going to keep going, and by the time we finish all 13 grades, we start over again? Is that kind of how this works?
Kind of, yes. I mean, that the intent is to, each year at least have a budget to replace furniture that's in need.
Okay.
Without doing, a whole school.
Okay. So the 3 years in, we've got one school done. We can see visible progress. People see we're doing it.
Correct.
Happy teachers, happy students, happy parents.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, so this kind of reminds me, I like that there's a cycle here, but one thing that capital budgets always struggle with, and so you, Lance and Susan, you guys know, is that the amount of capital money that's in the stabilization hasn't gone up for how many, 12, 13 years. And we're trying to have more money allocated because furniture is going to go up in costs, right? So what we're projecting is, even if you've got a plan and you've got it planned out, if we're not increasing how much we're spending on capital, it kind of, all it does is just keep getting squeezed. So for these kind of things, as we have these discussions, we may lean on you as well for projections on those sort of things to say, yeah, if the capital appropriation doesn't go up, we can't, even deploy these programs because of other stuff. So that's the conversation we're having, and it's important that you guys are aware and we include you in those conversations. So just to let you know.
To that end, if there are things we can do to help those conversations, then, absolutely let us know.
Great, thank you.
We're all breathing the same air. There's no question. Okay. So anything else on furniture, or shall we move on to the Chromebooks? Okay. So next line is the a grade level worth of Chromebooks at Deer Hill.
So currently, Deer Hill they share amongst 2 grades. Which is becoming more and more difficult, that they're actually sharing between 2 grades. It'd be ideal if each grade level had their own set of Chromebooks to work with. So that's what this is. This would allow for grade 3 students to have individual use of Chromebooks.
So
Okay.
when you say they're shared across grades, do you mean they're shared between 2, 3, 4, or do you mean that multiple students in grade 3 share a single Chromebook?
I believe it was sharing between grade levels.
So we've got a full class size worth of Chromebooks that are shared between grades 3 and 4. Sometimes grade 3 has them, sometimes grade 4 has them.
Correct.
Okay.
The grade 4 and 5, well, grade 5 has their own, and then grade 2 and 3 share.
It is a purchase or a lease?
This is that's a good question. I believe this is a purchase.
Thoughts about why purchasing versus when releasing the others? Should there
I
may be a
believe this
mechanism,
is a
but
purchase.
okay.
Okay, so I just want to go back to sort of who's doing what. I'm confused. So we've got grades 3, 4, 5 at Deer Hill. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, grade 5 has their own, and then grades 3, 3, and 4 share.
Yes.
Okay, and there are no Chromebooks up at Osgood, is that right?
I'm not sure, if Osgood has Chromebooks or if they have a shared,
I think there's still
Um,
iPads, but
I think I think, I want to say they're into the iPads right now and not Chromebooks, but I'm not 100% sure.
okay.
Lance, do you have a child at Osgood?
I do, and I don't think he has a Chromebook.
No, I don't think, I think it's
My,
iPads.
my recollection of this is that these were split from grade 3 to 4, and we wanted to get an additional set of Chromebooks so that each of 3 and 4 could have their own Chromebooks.
Yes.
So, and that's in keeping with the educational. What I do want to nail down, because I internalized this in our discussions at committee, that this was a addition to our lease. If there's a purchase, I just want to nail that down, and we definitely need to nail that down for the capital budget committee.
Yep. Yeah, because it looks like at the rate before, it's not significantly cheaper, but much cheaper to lease them. So again, they're Chromebooks, they're not expensive, but it's also good not to have them laying around after 3 years.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we should explore adding them to our existing lease if we can, or including them as a renewal.
Right, and this may or may not be relevant. Is there an urgency to doing this year, or is there a logic to rolling these in when we redo our lease at next year, given that we're in year 3 of 3 on our primary Chromebook fleet, or frankly, do we? Or are we just? I think we own these Chromebooks. Susan, you probably know Susan Franklin, you probably know the answer to this, but I think we probably own these Chromebooks at the end of the lease.
Yes.
Do we keep them a few years after the end of the lease?
We do. We do.
Okay, so we won't naturally just roll right into a new lease fleet. We'll ride these until.
Well,
We
There's
might
a-
need some. I can't say that they're all in top working order,
Right,
once they've been lent out. Not
You
sure
also-
what the condition they come back in.
Yeah,
I'm also wondering if you'd want to spend the new Chromebooks on students with more computational demands.
it's a good point. Corey.
So like if
Yeah.
you were going to do more, maybe you do have 100 Chromebooks that are in good enough condition for third graders and fourth graders to do their thing, and then
Right.
we could spend our capital on nicer, newer things for kids that are doing MATLAB or whatever.
Well, certainly every 3 years, the same $350 buys you a whole lot more computer. There's no question. So you take your older ones and drop them down to the little kids, and give the the more powerful devices to your.
Definitely. I can reach out to
Separate
Ron
box.
tomorrow and find out if that's what,
Okay.
if he thinks that could work.
Okay, sounds like someone on our committee needs to have a follow up with Ron just to understand the strategy here a little better. So
I'm
you,
good with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's me.
sorry. I mean, not involved in a lot of the IT
okay,
type of discussions.
Yeah.
Understood. From the school's perspective, you need another 100. We just okay. To separate those 2 grades and give them full capacity.
Yep.
All right, and we got to figure out if it's leased by and who gets which devices. Okay. Committee members, anyone else have questions on these Chromebooks?
Yeah, is it something that can be deferred, given that you're looking for $2 million? And we know that we're not going to be able to underwrite that much money. Is this something that can drop off the list?
So it's one of our 2 kind of educational requests, one being the flat screens, the other being the Chromebooks. I think it would make a meaningful move to the 3rd grade, of moving the needle to a better educational experience. If our schools will function without them, but I don't
When
think
you
we
say
want to take it
better
off the list.
educational experience, how is it deficient?
Sharing Chromebooks across 2 grades, so this would give them the access to the Chromebook every day.
Right, but at a 3rd grade, I mean, that's an 8-year-old.
Computers are moving down the age ladder every single day. I'm surprised myself what these kids are getting into.
All right,
And also a lot of the educational process has moved online. You don't get printed report cards anymore. You don't get printed grades anymore. It all comes through Aspen, all comes through the web interface. So yes, it's moving in that direction.
Okay, so if you had to choose between projectors, replacement furniture, Chromebooks, for the third grade, where would you cut?
Yeah, this is in priority list. So if we have to, we take the Chromebooks would be their first thing to remove, then followed by the furniture, then followed by the projectors.
Okay, or can you cut into the projector purchase and go from 46 down to some lower number?
I'm gonna try and take some lunch.
We
We
would then have
create
to pick and choose which teachers would have them and which teachers wouldn't have them.
Yeah, that would create a logistical issue in the deployment of the projectors that we'd like to avoid. Again, you know, we live in a world of limited means. So if there's only so much money to do so much things, then we'll react to it. But if you're asking for what our requests are, the request would be to fully fund, and to the extent we can't, the kind of prioritization is reflected in the chart.
Okay,
Okay.
so we should understand that if something needed cut, the first thing that would go, at least in terms of the request coming to the regular capital stabilization fund, would be the athletics vans. Is that how we should read this?
That's
Yeah.
fair.
Okay.
And the last thing would be the bus lease. We really need those.
Understood.
I think we all recognize that the bus lease is really something that can't be cut at all,
Yeah.
you know? So that's our starting point. And then we'll
Yeah.
just have to balance all the other departments across town.
Yeah, I don't envy the job of this committee.
It's the same
Yeah.
exercise every year, right? How do we
Yeah.
make it all fit? Do we have anything else in the Chromebooks, or should we move on to the vans?
Let's move on there. I do have a logistical issue. I probably have a hard stop right around 7:40. I just learned that I need to do a child transport.
Okay.
But I want to get through this, and I definitely want to talk about stabilization fund.
Okay, so let's get through the vans. What exactly we're trying to achieve, and why now?
So the additional vans, and there are some slides in the presentation. I will. The idea here is that actually with additional van capability, will have more flexibility to transport student athletes to various events, and at a cheaper rate. So you heard Ms. Owen at the beginning talk about some of our buses, and we use these giant buses to transport teams. We can, my screen is sharing. We've often missed events. We've had to cancel events because buses weren't available. With smaller vans, we don't have to have commercial driver's license and commercial drivers, and we can fit our smaller teams onto the vans that can be transported more cost effective than through the buses. So this is something I'm not going to come to this committee and represent that it's self-financing, but this is one that is ideally a cost saver over time rather than just an increased dump of capital. That's the theory. We've run some of the numbers on expenses. You can see them here, where we'll have to pay $765 to Charles Transportation for a 5-hour trip, which would be an athletic trip. $160 for our own bus. These are costs that can be defrayed by the flexibility of having some smaller vans. And as far as the utilization, we're looking for 2 passenger vans. We have 45 athletic teams. One of the things I often remind people about is that, part of the schools is like running a sporting complex. So we have 45 teams. Of those teams, 26 teams could be plugged into one van instead of a bus. 14 of the teams, an additional 14 could be plugged into 2 vans. So that gives us some more economical and more economical transportation that's also more flexible. We've had some situations where we've had to cancel sports trips because of lack of transportation. We've had to, Ms. Owen mentioned borrowing a bus from Scituate. So the idea here is that this is something that is, has a lessening expense impact on our budget while offering us more flexibility. So that's the high level story behind the vans.
Do we have a number in terms of what we actually spend currently outsourcing
Athletics?
Athletics? I mean, it's really this Charles Transportation number, because I'm looking at the Cohasset bus number at 160. That's the cost of the driver. I guess you'd save the cost of the driver if we had our own van.
And probably more fuel efficient too. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's on the margins. But Ms. Owen, do we have the total costs that we've spent on third-party transportation for athletics?
I do.
So
Very-
I don't know if the committee needs it now, but it just
I
as
can-
for efficiency's
Yeah,
sake, we
I
can
think for
follow up
efficiency,
with that number.
I can definitely send it to you. We have a breakdown of what we've spent with outside contractors versus when our own drivers drive. And you know, the idea with the van is the coaches would just drive the van. There wouldn't be an additional cost. So with vans, we may, you know, we'll have the cost of the van lease and the fuel, the insurance.
Right.
But the driver won't, the coach won't be won't be charging us. They'll be driving.
Is there a labor issue with that?
No.
Well, we would, of course, this may be something we have to bargain with the CTA. And, you know, as I'm sure many people on this call know, our contract will be coming up for negotiation in the coming year. So this may be an element that's in there. I think from a staffing perspective, I think coaches are willing to do it. They already are, there are already stipends and whatnot. So anyway, long story, I don't think that there's not a contractual driver clause right now in the contract. I can't say that they wouldn't try and have one. I can't say that we wouldn't agree to it. But right now there's not a additional cost attached to a coach driving a van.
So
But
I would
that's what
ask
they-
you, Susan, to give us your estimate on when we would break even with the cost saving.
Okay.
How long it would take to break even on the purchase.
We'll come back to you with the costs that
Okay.
we've spent and the estimate on a break even.
Great.
Can we loop back to what, last week, 2 weeks ago in the senior center?
Yeah.
Because we, you know, Lance, you obviously weren't on the meeting, but senior center has 2 of these exact vans that they're trying to get rid of. And
That's a win.
they were looking at trading it in for, I think, 32,000. And they were going to loop back with us, or somebody was going to loop back with us and say, oh, because they told us about you guys wanting a van. Was it the size of the van wasn't right, or was it? Remember this conversation? Does anyone else remember this? And we were supposed to get
I
looped
do,
back.
and what I came away with was that the Elder Affairs said that they are in touch with the schools, and the schools didn't think that it was a good fit. Plus, the schools would have to come up with the equivalent trade-in value.
It's up to us, but okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the two things that I recall.
Sorry, I think the challenge also is the Elder Affairs vans are 8-passenger vans. So these are substantially larger than what Elder Affairs is looking to trade in.
Oh, so even the transits are only 8-passenger?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they were the 12 or 15. Okay. All right. That's the answer. Thank you.
And that does ring a bell. I do recall hearing, now that you say that, I do recall hearing having a conversation about potential vans, but they were too small.
Yeah, well, the small blurry images on the vans look the same. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So great. We'll come back to you with the with the numbers on expenses and break even.
Right. I mean, it could work.
Yeah.
You know,
It'd be great. It'd be
break
great if
even within-
it's self-financing.
you know, within a relatively short amount of time. With
20,
the
30 years.
concern, you know, the potential constraint or difficulty if a teacher contract
Yeah.
does turn out to require, you know, additional expense for the driving, and then we've already purchased new vans, we're kind of stuck.
Yeah, in my experience dealing with the teacher contract, these sorts of things are not, they're not material, they're not immaterial either, but it'd be like, you know, $100 for the driver, for the teacher to do the driving. So it's
So that maybe you should factor that into your break even.
well, what we'll do is
assumption.
in order to, we'll give you something that reflects all sorts of contingencies. How about that?
Great.
And I know, Lance, you're pressed for time. We got 16 minutes. I'm just going to throw out a rhetorical question, ask you guys to think about it. Do we still need the handicap van? You don't have to answer today, but if we don't need it, you know, maybe it's a good time to get rid of it. Because they
Let's
got,
look into that, Ms.
We,
Owen.
our handicap van that the school owns,
yes,
we use it every day.
do you? Okay,
It's transport, yes, it's transporting one of our out-of-district students.
okay. There you go. That was quick and easy. Thank you. Okay. Do we have anything else on these athletic vans?
No.
Okay, let's just follow the numbers. The numbers usually give us a good, clear answer. And once again, this is the intersection of capital and operating. If a wise capital investment saves you guys a bunch on the operating side, that's what partnership means. So let's figure it out.
We'll come back to you with those numbers. So
Okay.
you have that break even on the expenses and the break even?
Yeah, I probably have all this information, just not at the tip of my fingers
Yeah.
right now.
So we can present that.
Okay. All right, let's move on to if everyone's okay with it, let's take this last 15 minutes and try and get through the school special stabilization fund and the 2 or 3 items that are being requested against it. So Lance, there's 3 items on this spreadsheet, and then I know you sent over sort of a sequential year-by-year evolution of the stabilization fund, which I think only included 2 of these requests on it. I didn't see
Right.
the 250 for the safety, which I see is also in italics. So why don't I just turn it over to you? Why don't you walk us through what you want us to focus on?
So you'll see these items on the spreadsheet. And again, I'll share my screen just so we're all literally on the same page.
Okay.
So this is our again, capital list. You see the ones in rows 11, 12, and 13. These are the ones indicated with S for stabilization. There are 3 items requested. One is an engineering study for the fire alarm for the Cohasset Middle High School. Our fire alarm is old, it is functioning, but it is at end of life. We were advised that the replacement of that fire alarm would run into about $1 million. So instead of requesting and sending over a check for $1 million, we think a wise first prudent step is to do an engineering study, find out exactly what's needed, exactly what needs to be replaced, and exactly how we're going to do it. This is coming out of the stabilization fund because we see this as one of these non-optional expenses that is directly related to building maintenance that we need to fund, and was frankly unexpected. So that's the story of the fire alarm. I'm going to skip down to row 13, the finishing retiling classrooms. This is a project that's been on the capital agenda for a number of years. This is important because the floors are just falling apart in Deer Hill, and that represents a significant maintenance issue and could potentially result in becoming a deferred maintenance issue that creates other costs down the road. So we want to have that finished, and think that's also a prudent spend in accordance with the spirit of the stabilization fund. Going back to number 12, safety buildings, lighting, health, and structure considerations and signage. You'll note that this was in italics. We included this in italics because this does not represent a consensus request of the school committee. There has been considerable debate about this one, and the school committee is frankly evenly divided on this, with one person literally on the fence. So I'm in my role as chair of the school committee, I'm bringing this to you with that caveat. The idea behind this is there are a number of items that we've had within the schools that require attention. Some of them are safety issues like lighting, appropriate lighting on the exteriors, and other sorts of, frankly, aesthetic sort of issues. Painting, pressure washing, other miscellaneous improvements. So the request here would be for an allocation of that fund to be put towards those sorts of issues, or those sorts of items, projects. Some of the debate at the committee was a large recognition that these are issues that need to be attended to. There was debate as to whether or not these are actual capital expenses or should be budgeted through a maintenance line item. There was a discussion about whether or not we would, if we can't get this done through capital, whether any of these things would ever be attended to. And there was also discussion about concerns of, because it's such a nebulous request, even at the school committee level, whether we could oversee the appropriate disposition of these funds. So
come back to us on that
line
one.
item.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's a line. Actually, I don't know that I'm going to have a committee request that's better than that
Yeah. And
So-
Lance, you should know that we spent about 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours with Nick on 11 and 13. And he was very patient with us with a lot of the questions about the study and the different strategies. And we talked about the tiles as well. So we did get very well briefed on that stuff. So you don't need to,
So
carry
if
the
you guys
whole
are,
weight here.
if you guys, that's great. If you guys are 11th, good on fire alarm and retiling. I think if we were, I guess, given the lack of committee consensus.
If I can, let's just pause there for a second. I think that assumption's good, but I want to make sure every member of the capital budget committee is comfortable with that. Are we comfortable with Nick's requests on the fire alarm and the retiling, or is there further discussion that needs to be had?
I would say if we had more questions, we'd bring Nick back in. Since
Okay.
Nick has been like really our point of contact for these, and Lance, obviously you can come as well, but
Yeah.
a lot of the questions we had before were, building in nature, and Nick was very attentive to really working through things with us. So
Okay, Michael, Susan, Francine, you guys good?
Yeah, I'm puzzled by why the school committee would be split on safety of buildings.
What, let's put that aside for a second,
And then one other comment. When we had our tour, it was stressed to us that the signage, and you could see signage was lacking and would certainly be a benefit, why that would also be left off. So I would like to see a better explanation.
Okay,
So the signage, the signage is
Ms. Owen,
listed here.
I think
before
the
we
chair
time
wants to
out,
direct the conversation. So
time out, please. There was a statement that we're comfortable with fire and the retiling, the fire alarm and the retiling. Okay. So before we moved on to line item number 12 and talk about that in detail, Michael, we're going to touch on your point in a moment. Okay. Just want to make sure everybody on the capital budget committee is comfortable with lines 11 and 13. Is there discomfort or conversation that needs to take place, or can we just move on to line number 12?
I'm comfortable with 11 and 13.
Okay, Francine,
I am as well.
Michael,
Yes.
Corey, you made the comment, and so I just want to make sure everybody was comfortable with it, and I am certainly comfortable with it. So with that said, let's move on to line item number 12.
So on line item number 12, so Mr. Dick, your comments are well taken. There's no one on the school committee that doesn't want safety of the buildings to be a priority. There are questions as to whether the identified projects are safety critical issues. And in fact, there's only one member of the committee that actually believes that the buildings are lacking in safety. And that's on record at our last committee meeting. So I'll just leave that there. As far as the nebulous nature, as far as the request, the concern is that from some committee members was it's a very nebulous nature. We don't have specific items that we're funding. I'll share my screen because it is part. Oh, I am sharing my screen. You can see in the attached there are certain items that this extending this mat on the gym to the 3-point line.
Lance, we don't see that part of your screen. We only see the main spreadsheet with the green things.
Oh, I'm sharing the wrong screen. Just I was so good earlier about my sharing. It's just perfect. So there. Am I back in spot?
Excellent,
You
thank
are.
you.
So this mat here, you can see this. These are the sorts of things that would be addressed under this $250,000 allocation for the stabilization fund. I think, Mr. Dick, to your point, why this has some debate at the committee level is whether or not this is an appropriate use of the stabilization fund itself. The stabilization fund, as we requested and presented at town meeting, is intended to help us defray some of the very significant expenses that we have coming up with our schools. And some of these, as you can see, that's the retiling, signage and so on. Signage, maybe something is important, and our building is a labyrinth. I'll confess that in the middle high school, I can get lost walking around those labyrinthine hallways as well. But I'm not sure we're ready yet for a specific request on what that signage should look like. We don't have anything spec'd out. We don't know if it's electronic, if it's going to be static. So that's an area. Now, some of this is if we're able to get a $250,000 request, then we can fill that out as we go, and we can spend the money. But that's what that request is. No one is debating the needs. I think the debate is on the vehicle. whether or not this is an appropriate use of the stabilization fund. And I also did put together what Mr. Host referred to earlier as and I called an indicative capital request list, just to show how the stabilization fund will work. In sum, we have about $18.5 million of identified projects that we know are going to need to be done within the next 10 years. This does not include significant projects that are also included on our AI3 report that we got a few years ago, which you can add the total, probably adds another 8 digits to that. So if we follow through and this had this indicative plan has not been vetted by the committee. This is something that Sue and I talked about today. But if you follow this plan through, there is a pathway to get to a place where we funded 2 roofs, repaved repaved 2 schools, fixed the fire alarm, and repaved both of our schools in 10 years, which is a great accomplishment. But it leaves unfunded a lot of other things. My point in that is that these are the sorts of things that the fund it can be used for, and I'm showing to this committee that we do have a longer term plan and are thinking in a longer term planning way about the stabilization fund. So that's my quick kind of overview. I don't have much more on the italicized row 12 because there isn't much specific substance identified other than just the general maintenance, deferred maintenance needs that we have at the school. And I do think there can be some discussion about whether or not some of those need to be budget items as opposed to capital requests.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
all right.
Lance,
That helps. Thank you.
you've got 4 minutes, so I'm going to share my knee-jerk reaction, and hopefully you can stay longer. But my knee-jerk reaction is that as you articulated the list, I was sitting here in my head thinking, what are these? Are they capital? Are they operating? And they're virtually everything that you articulated, with the exception of this pad, is a maintenance item. It's not an improvement. So it should absolutely be in the maintenance budgets. And I know Nick and his team, went through several hundred maintenance tickets last year. I forget the number, but I think it was 600 if I'm not mistaken. So I think you just need to enter these things. I mean, people aren't walking around looking for things to fix. Somebody's got to make the phone call and said XYZ needs fixed. And that's what they're there for. And there's a very large maintenance budget there to do exactly these things. To the extent that that there's an improvement that exceeds $10,000 and is going to have a lifetime of more than 18 months, that becomes a capital request, and it becomes a discrete capital request. And that's what we're here for. And we've got 2 town meetings each year. These things are supposed to be planned. These buildings they do present surprises, but generally we can get ahead of these things on an annual cycle. To the extent something comes up, we've got a special town meeting for things that were unanticipated for the annual. And to the extent there's a true emergency, we have a mechanism, directly through the advisory committee who can unilaterally deal with an emergency at any time throughout the fiscal year. So, the town and its bylaws and its governance and its mechanisms are in place to handle everything. My response is twofold. First of all, this really isn't a capital request. And it needs done, but it's really not a capital request. And secondly, I feel very strongly that, an allocation of any size, let alone $250,000, without extraordinarily discrete identified use of those funds, runs contrary not only to the spirit of the Warren article that created this fund in the first place, but it also runs contrary to the spirit of the town's bylaws. So I'm not okay with this.
I appreciate your candid feedback, and I will take that back to my committee.
Okay, and I apologize. I've burned 2 of the 4 minutes, and I just want to open this to anyone that has a thought on this. And you're welcome to stay with us, and we can discuss this as long as you like.
Is there any thought to setting aside funds for replacement of major items like roofs?
That's in that indicative 10-year plan. So we can I'll just share that quickly, and I may have bought some extra time, but I'll do this now just so you can see. Again, this has not been fully vetted this has not been vetted at all with our committee, but just to show you how we've just started thinking about this. In this spreadsheet here, you can see this is fiscal year ended 2025.
Yeah.
But we have, due to the magic of town accounting, we have about $3 million in this stabilization fund budget. We would spend these amounts, leaving us 2.5 million.
There
We
you go.
replace the fire alarm next year for $1 million, bank 3. We replace the roof replacement, best estimate on cost right now is $4 million. So we have a fiscal year ended 2027 estimate there. We spend that $4 million, we'll have in the account, we're left with 525,000. Then we can spend $1 million on repaving, which we just learned that's what that would cost in 28. Nothing in 29 to save up for another $4 million project in 2030. So now we've got 2 roofs done. Now, again, these costs are all going to go up and be in flux, but this is just an indicative kind of playbook. So after
Okay.
that, we've wiped our fund down to $25,000. So that also informs the fact that we can't do anything else with it in the intervening fiscal years. Moving on to fiscal year 31, we finished repaving our Cohasset Middle High School with, again, learning that's $1 million cost. Nothing in 32, nothing in 33, nothing in 34. All to save up for the massive $6 million roof project in 2035. So there's a lot of variables in here. That leaves us with the $500,000 in the account at the end of 10 years. And if we go up to the top, you can see that we have, and this is an older version, there are other things here, but we have about $900,000 of unfunded capital items that we know we're going to need to do. Boiler replacements for each of the schools. The Joseph Osgood generator, there's a generator at the middle high that is coming to end of life. We need to replace windows, that's indicated on our AI3 report. That's another 7-digit project. So there's a lot of other needs that we are going to try and cram into this fund, but that's the general thinking of the progression of how we're doing it.
Very good. Thank you.
And Lance, just so you're aware, when we talked about this with the language, the fund increases with Prop 2.5, has the ability to. So in your projections, you may or may not want to work in the escalation.
I'm a skeptic by nature or a cynic by nature.
No, I think you're accounting. Yeah, I like how you're doing it. So okay, as long as you're
I assume that nothing goes up, but I get surprised to the upside if it does.
okay.
Lance, I'm just looking at the CMHS roof in here at 6 million, and just thinking about it, conceptually relative to the size of Joseph Osgood or Deer Hill. I think about that building as being, 3, 4, 5 times the size. Where's that $6 million number coming from, and is that appropriate given it's only 50% higher than either of the other 2 buildings?
Frankly, these numbers are old numbers that we've had on our 10-year plan for quite some time. They do need to be refreshed, but I'm using them just for the purpose of illustrating how we can use this stabilization fund going forward, because I don't think we have done that yet with this group.
Okay, so these aren't the AI3 numbers or NICS numbers or anything else. These are just old placeholders from the 10.
I think they came from I think they came from AI3 numbers.
They did.
Interesting. Okay.
But they're also round numbers, so we've taken some liberties with them.
And as we've learned from the very first item on your list here, the fire alarm, which was in the AI3 report at $500,000, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Reality can be rudely different.
Well, and the one that was the most recent shocker is this one down here. We had planned to do $150,000 request in our regular way capital request for repaving of Joseph Osgood, and we found out that that's going to be about 1.1 million to do that. So that's now kicked the can down the road. And again, if you're going to spend on something, you need to be quite a bit more diligent on what you're going to get out of that.
Yeah, that one may be a section replacement as opposed to end to end at this point.
But we need to reevaluate that in terms of what that costs. So, and then just again to kind of go back to that row 12, I guess the feedback I can take back to our committee, and Mr. Ellis, you're very helpful on that. But I think that a lot of what we have here are needs that are identified, but we have not identified the solution and steps forward with enough specificity to include them on a capital request.
Okay, and I just want to pause for a second. You have one person's response from capital budget. I do want to open it up to other members of the capital budget committee to the extent that people have a view on this that hasn't already been articulated.
Conceptually, Brian, I'm with you as well. I mean, it does sound like 250 is a lot of pieces. I do think a couple of those may be capital requests, obviously, but it felt like a big bucket of M&Ms with different colors, and some had peanuts in them. So, come back with, as you break them out, and we'll chop through them one by one, and you'll find a bucket for them. Yeah.
Mike, Susan, Francine?
No, I appreciate, the fact that, the school committee has at least started to, put a framework together, going out 10 years. And you build upon that, you add more detail as you go along. So it's encouraging to see that, from the get-go, they're looking towards how do we deal with these major expenses, including roofs and repaving.
Okay.
So it's encouraging.
Okay, and regarding my my succinct feedback with regards to line 12, any further thoughts?
No, just standing by for a presentation that,
Okay.
that the committee stands behind.
Okay, Susan?
That the school committee stands behind.
Okay, Susan?
No, I concur. I think, not to use Corey's M&Ms again, but yeah, we need to know a little bit more about this candy before we can be comfortable just putting a bucket aside like that.
Yeah, candy jar is probably not the best analogy, but
It's not,
They got the peanut ones now. They got peanut. They got pretzel.
All right.
Come on.
Francine?
They got the brownie ones. Those are delicious.
The mint ones. Come on, let's go.
Francine?
Yeah, no, I concur with what folks have said already. I
Okay.
agree with Michael Dick, and just needing more detail.
Okay, I just want to make sure that my statements were not disparate from the views of the rest of the committee, so I'm glad that everyone has shared their views.
I appreciate that. And just a word on timing, if I may, the reason we have brought this to you now, even though we need a little more work, is just because the budget process is where it is. And we have slated for next week our public forum for the school budget. So we are at a point where we need to land the plane on it. So I appreciate your both indulgence of our delay from last week and hearing this out now, and certainly take your feedback back to our committee.
Okay, just a tip in order of complexity, I think that static physical signage is pretty straightforward, kind of a no-brainer. It's also very low cost. I think when we start to get into digital signage, people are going to want to know, okay, what is it that we're really trying to communicate other than where the classrooms are, which don't really
Absolutely.
So
I think those are some of the details that have yet to be fleshed out, to be fair.
Yes.
okay. All right, I don't have anything further on schools. Does anyone else on the committee have anything further on schools?
No, but thank you, Lance. And
My
Susan,
pleasure.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. It's been very helpful.
Great. We have some deliverables for you, which we will turn around in due course. So thank you for hearing us out, and appreciate your feedback.
Absolutely.
Great.
Have a good night.
Thank you so much for your time.
Bye.
You as well, Sue. Thanks, Lance.
Okay.
Okay, so the time is 7:47. And we're on to our 6:30 agenda item, which is town hall discussion. Now, this was a carryover from a week ago. And at that point, you know, the agenda was set prior to the forum that took place last week. So I'm not sure we really need to spend time on this. I watched the forum. I know others attended. Hopefully everybody watched it. I'm not sure I really want to even make a comment on it or go into it. I do think at some point this committee, you know, should spend some time directly with the citizens petitioners to hear the details of that, which is something I'd suggested in the past. And then ultimately, I think we need to move to spreadsheet, you know, the different alternatives, side by side, scope, estimate, just to understand why they differ, and hopefully, you know, we can develop a view over time. But I'm not really sure that that's tonight's business. Does anyone have anything that they actually want to discuss on this item tonight?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just
Okay.
curious if there are any updates from last Thursday or last time we talked.
Yeah,
It seems like
let's
there's a
let's
lot
start
up
with
in the
that.
air right now,
Yeah.
and that's always been my.
There is a lot up in the air, which is why I'm really hesitant to burn a
No,
whole lot on this.
exactly. That's
feel
why I
it
said, like,
just- every
are
time
there
we discuss
updates that
it,
are
it changes. So
that are meaningful? Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we dive into it.
but Mike wants to speak, and Michelle, I don't know if you have any updates or not, but let's do both. No updates, Michelle? Okay. And Mike, you had something you did want to speak about?
Yes, at the forum, I got up and I offered a comment that I felt it was time for a level set amongst the town manager's office, the select board, and any other, I'll use the term stakeholders, include that, and that in my mind includes the citizens petitioners, to compare notes and to really clear up any misalignments among assumptions made, where numbers came from, so that we can actually, for the benefit of the town, we can actually come up with some data or facts that we all agree on, and particularly when it comes in terms of scope and cost. And so that really is my comment. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure what influence you might have, Brian, in your role as chair, but I would encourage you to ask the select board if they would sit down with the town manager's office and the citizens petitioners, and without prejudice, go through the numbers and make sure that we are comparing apples to apples when it comes to assumptions and where cost estimates have come from. Thank you.
The other thing, Mike, and I'm going to steal something you said at the meeting. I thought your comments were well phrased at the meeting, but earlier I said there's a lot of things up in the air. I do wonder if what we really could use is a way to buy more time, a pause. There were a lot of really interesting ideas. I was surprised at the Cohasset Community Center proposal. It was farther along than, with more enthusiasm than I had assumed it would be. And if that proposal comes through and is strong, and we figure out a way to seed or guarantee some funding, or if that really becomes something, it changes a lot of calculations on a lot of fronts. So as I'm going down here, I'm thinking to myself, if a few of these puzzle pieces land differently, my thought process changes very, very dramatically, and we can get into different conversations. So I think you said at the meeting, like having a pause, having some way to buy ourselves some more time to let things mature, it would certainly, I think, make us all better able to really make a good decision, right? And I think town meeting is always 2 weeks away. Like it's so frustrating that it's always just coming up, and that's just how it is. But I do wonder if we did have 3 or 4 more months to develop these other things, where we could get, right? And I think that then the conversation would be a lot more productive, because I do think we're swimming in the dark a little bit still about what's possible.
I agree.
Okay. Michael, I didn't respond to your comment. It was just taking it in. I think if I can summarize this, I think what you suggested at that forum is fundamentally what I've articulated we should undertake as a committee. So one way or another, I think it needs to happen. It's always better if proponents take charge and our committee doesn't have to intervene and do it for them. It's just always more graceful, and frankly, the flow of information is better and more collaborative. But I hear your point. I didn't respond to it earlier. I just want you to know I hear your point. And one way or another, this does have to get done. I think that identifying the highest priorities for scope is probably going to be the easiest place to reach consensus. As you get further down the scope list, there may be more difficulty in agreeing on whether or not it's in or out. And I think that the cost estimates are probably going to be probably going to require more work to really get people to, the same place. But at least we can understand why the numbers are different, and people can make their own decisions as to how reality is going to play out.
I have to say, I really hope that the select board rises above their opposition in the interest of just getting to consensus. And by that, I mean sitting down with all of the stakeholders, and I'll use that term again, and that would include the Cohasset Cultural Committee, as well as the citizens petitioners, to really level set and with cooperation amongst the three groups, and just say, let's put aside all the water that's gone under the bridge so far.
Yeah.
And let's truly see what we can do, because these are all good ideas that have come forward and need to be weighed and evaluated by the select board. Ultimately, it's their call, I think. You know, that they're the ones bringing the warrant articles up. So that's my feeling.
Okay. Is there anything further on town hall? Should we move on? Okay. Capital debt discussion. So Michelle Leary shared a spreadsheet, which I don't know, Michelle, if you can possibly pull it up, but it just shows the evolution of the capital debt. Michelle, are you still there, or have we lost you? Possibly.
I'm here. I'm just looking for the document.
Okay.
Sorry.
Respectfully understand that you may be multitasking. So that was not a criticism.
Or asleep.
We have that tendency at times. For all those that don't get excited about capital requests. Okay. So I don't know if it's possible to blow that up just a little bit for those of us that are aging significantly. All right. Okay, so there it is. You can see what we've borrowed for in the past and how that debt service runs off.
And Brian, since I'm new, is this something that comes out of the stabilization fund, the 539, or the appropriation, or is this in another bucket somewhere?
No, it does come out of the five.
Out of the 2 million total.
1996, and that is exactly the point. Okay, so we've had this circular dog chasing tail discussion in the past about, well, why don't we just, you know, borrow to cover this or borrow to cover that, and this is your answer, exactly why. Because you know, you just spread the pain and eat into your capacity to fund current requests in the future. Now, sadly, you know, some of the biggest items on here, you know, were
Senior Bound and Border Street, exactly. Those are just, they are what they are.
It's exactly, it's Cedar Bound and Border Street. I mean, Bound is, you know, it's the gift that just never stops giving in terms of that, giving us new debt service. You know, Border Street was presented to us as you know, non-elective, right? Either do it or you're going to lose the bridge, and it's going to cost a whole lot more.
Correct.
So, and then we did take on a bunch of debt in 21, which I'm not really happy about, but there it is. You know, it's something that we should avoid at all costs. It's, you know, it's just a, you know.
But there wouldn't have been enough money in the appropriation for 21 to cover those 4 items.
There certainly wouldn't have been, but it begs the question: should we have just simply spread them out over, you know, over 4 years, right? Anyway, I don't want to wax philosophical. I just want you guys to see this and understand. You know, we lose 540 right off the top of the appropriation as a result of past sins. So that's, you know, it's going to leave us with like 1.4 to spend in terms of the new appropriation that comes in.
Right.
Okay. I think there's also another, you know, 500 in there that they came in through the last STM, but we were below our target balance to begin with, so that needs topped up. Anyway, there it is. There. Any questions on capital debt service?
No.
Okay. And then minutes. I think we have 2 sets of minutes that were distributed a week or 2 ago or 2 weeks ago. I don't know if people have had a chance to go through them. I have. If everyone has, you know, maybe we just clean up the typos in here and approve these. If people have not had a chance to go through them, we can defer this to the next meeting. Is everyone had a chance to go through?
Yeah.
Susan, yes. Mike, yes. Corey, yes. Francine wrote them, I believe, so she's been through them and I've been through them. So let's go through them. February 28th, I had a couple of small changes. And Francine, if you know, if you actually have this document in front of you, I'll go through these. If not, I can take a photo and send them to you. But first, second, third paragraph, last line says associated with one Pleasant leased, should be lease, Lease. Next paragraph, last line, temporary certificate of occupancy to a certificate of occupancy. I think you changed to a and to read and a permanent. So this is temporary certificate of occupancy and a permanent certificate of occupancy. Next paragraph, first line, right in the middle, says spend. It should be spent. Last line at 809, it says C. Evan. It should be C. Evans. And those were my changes. I don't know if anyone has anything else.
Would you mind sending those to me, Brian?
Not
I'm
at
sorry,
all.
I'm not in front of my computer. I'm on my phone today.
I'll snap a photo on my phone and text it to you right away. Okay.
Perfect. That works perfect. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any further changes to these? Okay. Entertain a motion to adopt the meetings as or the minutes as amended. Anyone?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm fighting with Outlook
Second.
here.
Yeah.
Sorry, Corey, you ready to go or no?
No, I'm trying to pull them up. I search Outlook and then I don't know why Outlook and I just do not get along. It's just so frustrating. I got them. Okay. No, I don't. There they are. Sorry, my apologies, everybody. Totally on me. I'll make a motion unless Mike, you were starting and I interrupted.
Second.
Motion
Okay.
to approve 2/28/24 and 3/4/24. With the
Well, I have some changes on
Oh, you've only done one.
3/4, so let's just make the motion on 3/28 or 2/28, please.
okay, motion to approve minutes for February 28th, 2024 is emailed.
Second.
As amended. Sorry, as amended.
Oh,
Okay.
my apologies. You confused me with the edits, yes. Motion to approve 2/28/24 minutes as presented and amended by Mr. Host this evening.
Thank you. And do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Roll call vote. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Mike Dick,
Mike Dick, aye.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Francine Lyons,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Brian Host, aye. Okay. So that's 2/28. March 4th had a couple of small comments in paragraph 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph, 1, 2, 3, third line. Sentence says a permanent occupancy can't be issued. Just say a permanent occupancy, insert the word permit. And then in the next line, it says fire alarm and egress work is completed. Just delete the word is. Those were my changes. I'll send them to you in a moment, Francine.
Thank you.
And also on the third page of these, first line says 7:55 p.m. C. Evans, should be C. Evans.
I'm sorry I keep doing that to you, Corey.
And I think that
Tell
was
me
it.
whatever you want.
So those were my
I'm so
amendments. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll move we accept the minutes of March 4th, 2024 as amended.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Do a roll call vote. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Corey Evans,
Corey Evans, aye.
Francine Lyons,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Mike Dick,
Mike Dick, aye.
Brian Host, aye. Okay, so minutes done. Anything else we need to discuss? Items not reasonably known with 48 hours ago,
A lot of things I don't reasonably know.
but nothing for tonight. All right, good stuff. Well, with that, I'll let me just ask for next week, Monday, Wednesday, what works best for everybody? Stick with Mondays.
I will not be in town on Monday.
Same. Head up
Same.
for an eclipse. Yep.
Is Wednesday the better night?
It seems some other night, yeah.
Wednesday's
Wednesday
good for me.
works for me. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Michelle, does that work for you?
Yep.
Okay, so let's shoot for Wednesday, 6 o'clock.
Let's just nail down the agenda this week so we can get it posted.
All right, sounds
All right,
great.
and what are we looking, who are we looking to hear from? Which departments?
That's a really good question. The only thing that's top of mind is we need to talk to Nick about the senior center heating system.
Yes, that's an outstanding item.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That is the outstanding item.
So we've got nothing coming from Lori or Ron, Lori for Harbor or Ron for IT.
No, not this year.
Okay. So it seems like we're through everything at this point. We just need to tighten up numbers and figure out how to deal with this senior center heating issue. Trying to think what else we need to cover or do.
I'm looking at the capital sheet. Let's look.
I don't know if we'll be ready next week, but we should put a placeholder for town hall in the event that something transpires between now and next week.
Yeah, I agree with you, Michelle.
Maybe we should just keep that on the agenda weekly until we,
Agreed.
What the select board did, yeah. Do we want to talk about Parker Ave dock or mooring in the harbor?
That's a really good question. I think we probably should. I also think that's probably a CPC request, but if they go to CPC, we still need to hear the request.
Yeah, and there's also still the outdoor pavilion for the library project, which is on this list too. I don't know what the status is with that, so.
Which is also CPC. So I guess
Correct.
we should try to hear from both. Michelle, do you know if they're coming to CPC this year, or this cycle?
I believe the library pavilion is a CPC request. I do not believe that any of the harbor requests are going to CPC this year,
Okay.
but I can follow up with Laurie and see.
Is the Parker
Okay.
Avenue dock actually CPC eligible for recreation? Is that the,
It all depends on what the use is going to be. I have to follow up with Laurie. I'm not
okay,
versed in it.
fine.
It's a really good question, Corey. I just assumed that the ramp was CPC, but that's not actually accurate. The ramp was state funded.
Yeah, so Parker Ave, the building, we talked about that because it was historically designated that way, it was CPC eligible for maintenance.
Yeah.
Except for what, roofs, right? And but yeah, the dock is, I don't believe recreation either. I think it's just infrastructure. So I think for recreation, it has to be zoned recreation too. I don't even know what it's zoned.
I
for.
really don't know. I'm just thinking
Yeah.
out loud. I mean, it's the only dock where you can launch a boat and then tie the boat to a dock.
But Parker Ave's not like a park or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay.
Well, strictly speaking, it is a park.
yeah.
Is
It
it?
is a park. It's a
Yeah, it
town
is.
park, Mariners
Oh.
Park.
Mariners
Okay.
Park.
Cool.
Right.
Well, maybe there's a sweet.
But I'm no expert on designation.
Nor I, but that would be my logical starting point. I mean, we are all already sort of well oversubscribed in terms of the capital available to us. So, but we should hear it regardless whenever they're ready.
Okay.
Well, that'll be more than enough to cover next Wednesday.
Okay.
And we're only 8 minutes over budget tonight. Maybe a new world record. All right, folks. With that, anything else, or should we entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second,
All right. Let's do a roll call vote. Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, I.
Corey Evans,
For Evans, aye.
Francine Lyons,
Francine Lyons, aye.
Michael Dick,
Michael Dick, aye.
Brian Host, aye. Time is 8:09, and we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Right.
You too.
Night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.